it was morning. It's a privilege to join each and every one of you today as we remember the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. Today is a day across the nation where we recall on April 4th, 1968, when shots rang out over the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. They rang out across this nation and indeed this world. A man who took a moment and turned it into a movement. He marched not only for himself, but for all of mankind. We learned was a mere mortal. We're here today because the life, the legacy, and indeed the lessons that may not have been appreciated in 1968 are still teaching each and every one of us today. The lessons live on. They live on in the students that were here. They live on in the legislators that we're trying to educate in this Capitol. They live on in the grandmothers that are taking care of, yes, a second generation across not only this Commonwealth, but indeed this nation. As we recall the March on Washington in 1963, Dr. King talked about not accepting gradualism. He talked about the fierce urgency of now that the promises of this democracy that must not operate in darkness but rather in the light, we must fight for. They are not self-fulfilling, but rather the preamble to the Constitution was meant for a reason. We, the people of the United States, we are what forms this more perfect union. As we are here today, I am mindful and grateful that as your Secretary of State, we have come a ways when it comes to making sure we're breaking down barriers to that ballot box. We have fought to make sure no soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, National Guard, or Coast Guard ever has to question, Secretary, does my vote count? Passing the first ever Military Heroes Voting Rights Bill. We have fought to pass great legislation to help victims of domestic violence protect their identity when it comes to voting so they don't have to worry that person they stood across from in the courtroom can find them or their loved ones. We have fought to make sure that that process of registration is brought online so we are reaching out to all Kentuckians. Let me hear y'all say, go vote Kentucky! But let us not forget that we have still a long ways to go. We are the last in the nation to automatically restore nonviolent felony offender voting rights. That is wrong, and we must do better. Folks should not be sentenced to a lifetime of silence, and I don't want to be like Florida, Iowa, or Virginia, or count on a governor to restore those rights. When you pay your debt to society, they should be automatically restored. Dr. King, he talked about the importance of that right to vote and what it just means to be a human. He said, if I don't possess the right to vote, I don't possess myself. Because you see, I don't make up my own mind, it's made up for me. I don't live in a democratic society where I help enact laws, but rather I'm forced to submit to the edict of others. Folks, when democracy is broken for one of us, it is broken for all of us. We're here today because the least, the last, and the lost among us, they require us to lift our voices and yes, to get a little rowdy and get up and get out and get loud. We're here today because the life of Dr. King is one that we still march for, we still hope for, we still live for. That fierce urgency of now is something I hope everyone, not only here today, but all across this Commonwealth, indeed this nation, will embrace. My fellow Kentuckians, I ask you, are you willing to stand up for those millions of young kids who we see standing up and telling adults, you aren't getting it right? We are marching for safer schools. Let me just say yes. Are you standing up and embracing the fierce urgency of now for the millions of women who didn't just start marching last year, but have been marching for equality of opportunity and voting rights, and yes, the ability to decide what happens to their own body. Let me hear you say yes. Are you embracing the fierce urgency of now of our working men and women who should not have a budget balanced on their backs as we give tax breaks to corporations? Let me hear you say yes. And are you embracing the fierce urgency of now that our educators and yes, our public employees demand as we hold true to the promises that this government made them? Let me hear you say yes. Yes. You are that more perfect union. But what stands in the way, folks, is that only a minority of people are going to vote. So that means a minority of people are determining what's happening to a majority of us. Is that okay? No. It's not. We're here today to recommit ourselves to establishing that more perfect union, embracing that fierce urgency of now, and yes, getting up and getting out and getting loud. So my fellow Kentuckians, will you stand and let me hear you say that you will register to vote? Yeah. Will you stand and let me hear you say you will translate that registration into participation? Let me hear you say yes. Yeah. Thank you all very much. God bless each of you. Thank you, Reverend, for bringing us here today. Thank you, guys.